February 1943, Western Tunisia. Night hangs over a narrow mountain pass. Cold wind whistles through the rocks. Engines tick as they cool. Inside a low stone farmhouse turned command post, a German officer sits at a rough wooden table. One candle, one map, one notebook. Outside, distant bursts of gunfire fade. The shouting is over. The road behind the pass is littered with burned-out American trucks and abandoned guns. He dips his pen, writes slowly, without emotion. The Americans are soft. Their doctrine is clumsy. Their leaders are not ready. He has seen them break, shallow foxholes crushed under tank tracks, units scattering under fire, helmets and rifles left in the dust. He counts the cost, thousands of casualties in days, equipment thrown away faster than the enemy can destroy it. He makes a quiet calculation. They will need months to fix this. On the map, his pencil draws the next arrow through the same pass, the same ground, the same enemy. But in just a few weeks, when his tanks come back to this kind of valley, they will not find the same army waiting for them. February 19th, 1943, Kasserine Pass. At first light, German armor moved. Columns of panzers and self-propelled guns rolled toward the narrow gap in the Tunisian hills. Behind them, dust and exhaust hung in the cold morning air. On the American side of the pass, the line was thin and scattered. Units were dug in on separate hilltops, outposts isolated, artillery batteries parked with little coordination between them. Orders came from a distant headquarters, buried safe in a rear valley, connected to the front by long, fragile radio nets. When the first German shells hit, the pattern repeated itself. Forward positions broke contact early. Some platoons pulled back without orders. Others fought alone until tanks appeared on their flanks and behind them. Trucks clogged the roads as support units tried to escape. Radios crackled with overlapping voices, then went dead. Over 8 days of fighting in and around Kasserine, American forces suffered roughly 6,000 casualties, killed, wounded, and captured, and lost large amounts of equipment, much of it abandoned along the roads and in the passes. But the numbers on the casualty lists did not show the real damage. That damage was inside the men. Soldiers who had arrived in North Africa joking about a quick trip to Berlin now stared at the ground and avoided eye contact. Some talked openly about going home. Others wondered if their officers knew what they were doing at all. Stories spread of units overrun in minutes, of tanks appearing out of the morning mist and driving straight through American positions, while machine gun nests fell silent or fired wildly and then fell back. For the Germans, the battle looked very different. Their armored groups had done exactly what their doctrine demanded: identify the weak seams, mass tanks and assault guns, punch through, then wheel into the flanks and rear. At Kasserine, that doctrine worked almost perfectly. The enemy positions were spread out. Artillery fire was uncoordinated. No one seemed able to turn scattered units into a solid wall. From the German point of view, this confirmed the impression formed in the first days of contact. The Americans were brave enough as individuals. As an army, they were unprepared. Their leaders did not know how to use armor. Their staff systems broke under pressure. In reports and conversations after the battle, German officers spoke of an opponent who might become dangerous one day, but not soon. Training, doctrine, leadership, logistics, all of that would take months to repair. Until then, they believed, passes like Kasserine would remain open doors. To understand why both sides were so sure of their judgment, you have to look at where their commanders came from and what kind of wars had shaped their ideas. He did not invent speed in war, but he built his whole career on it. Erwin Rommel came of age in the mud of the First World War. As a junior officer, he led small units through chaos, hills, forests, broken front lines, and discovered that surprise and movement could compensate for almost anything. In 1917, at Caporetto, he pushed a handful of men deep into Italian positions, bypassing strong points, taking prisoners faster than his superiors could count them. The lesson was simple: do not attack where the enemy is ready. Find the seam, slip through, move faster than his orders can travel. 2 decades later, in 1940, that lesson scaled up. As a Panzer Division commander in France, Rommel drove his tanks across the Meuse, pushed through French defenses, and kept going. His columns advanced so far and so fast that even German headquarters sometimes lost track of him. 6 weeks later, France fell. The method had proof on a continental scale. In North Africa, beginning in 1941, he applied the same logic to the desert. When British forces dug in, he flanked them. When they stalled, he lunged. At Gazala in 1942, his armored group slipped around the southern end of the British line, struck supply points, and shattered what looked like a solid defensive belt. Again and again, smaller, lightly supplied German and Italian forces beat larger, better-equipped opponents because they struck first, struck where the line was thin, and did not stop. To Rommel, doctrine was not about thick manuals. It was about tempo. Initiate contact, force the enemy to react, exploit every hesitation. If fuel and ammunition ran low, that was a problem for later. First, break his cohesion. On the other side of the ocean, a different officer was learning almost the opposite lesson. George S. Patton started in the old cavalry. He believed in speed and shock, but he also believed in control. In 1918 at Saint-Mihiel, and later in the Meuse-Argonne, he led some of the first American tank attacks in history. He saw tanks charge ahead, alone, and die under artillery because infantry and guns could not keep up. He also saw what happened when everything worked together: infantry, armor, artillery, and engineers moving in a coordinated plan. His takeaway was different from Rommel's. Speed mattered, but speed without discipline was suicide. Tanks had to be part of a system. That system had to be drilled, rehearsed, and enforced. Between the wars, Patton became one of the loudest American advocates for armored warfare. He studied foreign exercises. He wrote and spoke about mechanized units. He argued that future battles would be decided by well-trained combined arms teams, not by scattered heroics. He was obsessed with standards, correct uniforms, strict salutes, precise formations. To him, those were not cosmetics. They were proof that a unit could follow orders under stress. When the United States entered the Second World War, Patton finally got the test he wanted. In 1942, leading Western Task Force during Operation Torch, he oversaw amphibious landings in North Africa and early operations in Morocco and Algeria. Again, his pattern appeared: harsh discipline, constant presence near the front, and relentless insistence that armor, infantry, and artillery fight as one. His doctrine was clear. Victory came from organization, from units that did the right thing automatically because they had practiced it until it hurt. Where Rommel was willing to gamble on daring moves to make up for shortages, Patton wanted to build a machine that did not need to improvise at the last second. By early 1943, their paths bent toward each other. Rommel entered Tunisia as the master of desert maneuver, confident that one more well-timed blow could disrupt the inexperienced Americans and buy time for his exhausted forces. Patton, meanwhile, waited in the wings, a tank general with a fully formed theory of discipline and combined arms, watching another man's army stumble under its first real test. Kasserine Pass was the first meeting between Rommel's method and the U.S. Army. It confirmed every belief the Germans held about this new opponent, but it was only the beginning of their confrontation. The real clash would come when Patton finally put his hands on that broken army and tried to turn it into something Rommel had not yet faced. After Kasserine, the reports on the German side sounded almost calm. American weapons were not the problem. Their rifles, guns, and tanks were serviceable. When cornered, individual soldiers could fight hard. The problem lay higher. Command posts were too far back. Orders were slow. Units broke contact without coordination. Staff officers did the math. To fix this, they wrote, would take time. Months to replace weak commanders. More months to retrain staffs. A year, perhaps, before doctrine and practice caught up with the realities of modern war. In early March 1943, German commanders looked again at the map of central Tunisia. One name stood out: El Guettar, a valley, a road, and hills on both sides. If armored units pushed hard through that sector, they could hit American forces still recovering from Kasserine, disrupt their positions, and relieve pressure on other parts of the front. They still had assets to do it: the 10th Panzer Division, with dozens of operational tanks and assault guns;
veteran infantry and anti-tank units, artillery that had already proven its effectiveness against American lines. Fuel and ammunition were tight, but for one sharp blow, they believed, it would be enough. The expected result looked straightforward. American units, still led by many of the same officers and supported by the same staff system, would crack under a concentrated armored assault, just as they had at Kasserine. A rapid attack in late March, before any deep reforms could take hold, should punch a hole and repeat the pattern. Every assumption in that plan came from experience. Every conclusion matched what German eyes had seen in February. What they did not know was that the clock they were using was wrong, and that in the few days before Guettar, someone on the other side was moving much faster than their estimates. March 6, 1943, Tunisia. A staff car roars up to 2 Corps headquarters. Dust, exhaust, and a blare of sirens announce the new commander before anyone sees his face. He steps out in full dress uniform, polished boots, riding breeches, stars shining in the sun, in a camp where most men have stopped bothering with even clean shirts.
Inside the tent, breakfast is still on the table. Patton checks his watch. 10 o'clock. Too late, too relaxed. By the next morning, mess will close at 7:30 a.m. Any officer late will simply not eat. The changes come fast. Day 1, inspections. He drives the roads himself, stops jeeps, checks helmets, leggings, ammunition belts. No salutes, wrong uniform, helmets unstrapped, $25 fines on the spot. Half a month's pay for a private. Officers who let it slide are relieved without ceremony. Day 2, orders on appearance and bearing become formal Corps policy. Helmets on at all times, even going to the latrine. Ties for officers. Clean, complete uniforms for everyone. It sounds pay. It is not. Each time a soldier knots his tie and straps his helmet, he is reminded that the easy pre-Kasserine army is gone. Day 3 and beyond, the focus shifts to how the Corps will actually fight. Artillery officers drill new fire direction procedures, learning to mass guns from different battalions on a single target instead of firing in scattered local missions. Anti-tank units rehearse engagement areas. Infantry and armor practice moving together instead of wandering off on separate missions. All of this happens in days, not months. From March 6th to the first clashes east of Gafsa and toward Guettar, Patton has barely 10 to 14 days to turn a shaken Corps into a coordinated force. At first, the reaction is anger. Soldiers curse the fines, the inspections, the helmets, and the heat. They think the new commander is putting on a show for the cameras. But as the drills continue and the units start to move with more confidence, something shifts. Men who felt like victims at Kasserine begin to feel like they are being forged for a reckoning. They do not know exactly when or where that reckoning will come. The German staff has already circled a name on the map, Guettar, and the day is closer than anyone in the ranks can imagine. March 23, 1943, just before dawn. On the German maps, Guettar looked promising. A valley floor broad enough for tanks, low hills on both sides, a road cutting straight toward American positions. The plan was familiar. Push 10th Panzer Division through the gap, roll up the defenses, repeat the pattern of February. At first, reality matched the plan. Around 6 a.m., more than 50 German tanks and assault guns rolled out of the pass toward the American lines. Dust clouds rose behind them. Aircraft circled overhead. Forward American infantry and artillery outposts were overrun or forced back in the opening rush. This was what German commanders expected to see: a hard armored thrust, scattered resistance, an enemy starting to fray. Then the attack hit something that had not been there at Kasserine: minefields. As the lead tanks approached the Kadab Wadi at the base of Hill 336, hidden mines stopped 8 panzers in their tracks. The formation slowed to sort itself out. Tanks bunched up. Some tried to weave around the disabled vehicles. That pause was all the Americans needed. Observers on the ridges called in coordinates. Artillery batteries that had spent the last 2 weeks drilling masked their fire. Shells from multiple battalions landed together. Time-on-target salvos, not scattered local guns. From the German side, the effect was shocking. Instead of a few ranging shots, a wall of explosions slammed into the stalled armor and the vehicles behind it. At the same moment, tank destroyers and anti-tank guns dug in along the planned avenues of approach, opened fire on the silhouetted panzers in the valley. At Kasserine,
American guns had been out of position, uncoordinated, slow to concentrate. Here, they had been placed with a clear purpose: turn the valley into a killing zone. Within an hour, roughly 30 German tanks lay knocked out or burning in front of the American lines. By around 9 a.m., the first German assault had stalled and then pulled back to reorganize. The method that had worked so well before, rapid thrust through a seam, then turn on the flanks, ran into a different set of conditions. Fuel and ammunition were limited. Air superiority now belonged to the Allies, who harassed regrouping German forces during the midday pause. Most importantly, there was no longer a loose, hollow line to punch through. Instead, there was a prepared, connected defense designed around artillery and anti-tank fires. In the afternoon, around 4:45 p.m., German armor tried again, this time with infantry more closely following the tanks. Once more, they advanced into overlapping fields of fire. Once more, American artillery, resupplied during the pause, and tank destroyers stopped the attack short of a breakthrough. The cost was heavy on both sides. American units lost dozens of tank destroyers and tanks and suffered thousands of casualties over the course of the fighting around El Guettar. But the crucial difference lay in the outcome. The line held. No gap opened. The 10th Panzer Division left roughly 30 of its tanks in the valley and failed to break through the 1st Infantry Division's positions. From the German perspective, this was the moment of shock. The ground was similar. The map looked similar. The opponent was the same Second Corps they had seen crumble at Kasserine, yet the behavior of that opponent was different. The artillery was coordinated. The anti-tank defenses were layered. The infantry stayed in place under fire. Rommel's style, fast, opportunistic, exploiting confusion, had not suddenly become wrong. The terrain, the logistics, and above all, the enemy had changed. Patton's method, built on discipline, rehearsed combined arms, and deliberate use of ground, fit these new conditions better than the old assumptions about soft Americans. The result at El Guettar was not a clean, one-sided victory. It was something more important for the story of the U.S. Army. The same corps that had broken in the passes at Kasserine had just stood its ground against a full-scale attack by 10th Panzer Division and turned the valley into proof that the Desert War was no longer one way.
German officers did not leave El Guettar in triumph. They left asking hard questions. In the days after the battle, German staff tried to understand why the familiar pattern had broken. Prisoner interrogations, radio intercepts, and frontline reports all pointed to the same uncomfortable conclusion. This was not the same American force they had met at Kasserine. Artillery was now coordinated, not scattered. Anti-tank guns were sighted in depth. Infantry held positions instead of dissolving at the first armored thrust. Internal assessments began to reflect that shift. Reports noted that American artillery responded quickly and with precision, that tank destroyers engaged effectively from prepared positions, and that command and control appeared more professional than just a month earlier. One U.S. Army study summarizing German reactions observed that the enemy now regarded American artillery coordination as a serious problem, not an afterthought. The idea of the soft American, at least in North Africa, was starting to crack. The change was not only visible in German files. Allied analysts also saw it. A later examination of Kasserine and its aftermath concluded that rapid adjustment by U.S. units, particularly in the employment of artillery, turned back the Axis attack, highlighting that German assumptions about a slow-learning opponent had been overtaken by events. What had looked like a one-off humiliation at Kasserine was being refiled, in hindsight, as the first stage of a steep learning curve. After the war, when German generals were questioned about their adversaries, their view of American forces had clearly evolved. Heinz Guderian, the Wehrmacht's leading panzer theorist, remarked that from the standpoint of a tank specialist, he must congratulate Patton on his campaigns because he acted as Guderian himself would have done in his place. General Günther Blumentritt recalled that they regarded Patton extremely highly as the most aggressive panzer general of the Allies, noting that his operations impressed them because he came closest to their own ideal of a classical commander.
Even beyond Patton personally, former German officers and later historians acknowledged that American forces in the West adapted faster than many in Berlin had expected. One modern analysis of Kasserine emphasizes that U.S. units and institutions showed a striking capacity for rapid learning, turning an initial defeat into improved doctrine, training, and equipment in a matter of months. The myth of an eternally clumsy, second-rate American army did not survive contact with Guettar, Sicily, and the campaigns that followed. That verdict did not come from American self-congratulation. It came, slowly and sometimes reluctantly, from the men who had once assumed that passes and valleys like Kasserine would always be theirs to exploit. By the end of the North African campaign, both sides understood that something more important than a single pass had changed. In May 1943, it was over. Axis forces in North Africa surrendered. More than 250,000 men taken prisoner in Tunisia. Rommel was recalled to Europe, his desert campaign finished, his reputation still formidable, but no longer surrounded by the aura of invincibility. Patton, after North Africa and Guettar, went on to command 7th Army in Sicily and then 3rd Army in France, driving across Europe with the same mix of discipline, speed, and combined arms coordination he had tested in Tunisia. The influence of their methods outlived both men. Rommel's way of war, fast armored thrusts, mission-type orders, exploiting weakness instead of battering strength, is still studied in military academies around the world. So is its limitation. Maneuver without secure logistics and air support eventually hits a wall. Patton's approach and the American learning curve after Kasserine helped shape a doctrine built on flexible combined arms, robust staff work, and a culture that treats failure as data to correct, not shame to hide. If you strip away the flags and uniforms, the contrast is clear. One method trusts boldness to outrun its problems. The other method uses discipline to solve them before the shooting starts. One lives on tempo, the other lives on preparation. A simple formula emerges. Speed wins battles. Adaptation wins campaigns. The side that learns faster changes the rules of the next fight. That lesson reaches far beyond North Africa. Armies, companies, institutions, even individuals all face their own version of Kasserine, a moment when confidence breaks and weaknesses are exposed in public. Some spend months denying it. Others do what Patton did with Second Corps: accept the pain, change the system, and turn the next valley into a different story. In the end, Tunisia in 1943 was not just about a pass lost and a valley held. It was about a young army that discovered the hard way that courage is not enough, and then, in a matter of days, learned to fight in a way that made sure the desert would never break it like that again.